Hey everybody, I'm here today to talk to you about the California Real Estate Purchase Agreement. I've got the 5 most important things that you really need to pay attention to with the purchase agreement, including one thing that I will reveal at the end that is a brand new change as of March 1st. 2026. You need to understand what you're signing and you need to understand how the contract works to protect both sides. So let's dive in. Okay, number one thing that happens within a real estate contract in the state of California, and it's really important that both buyers and sellers understand what it is they're negotiating on, and that's the EMD, which is otherwise known as the earnest money deposit. So essentially, when you're selling your home is your skin in the game. It's how what you have invested in the process. And while your home is on the market, that home is attracting attention, getting offers, and all of that good stuff. Well, once you open escrow, your home is no longer active on the market, it's active under contract. And so that's your skin in the game as a seller. It's the home itself, right? That's the collateral, that's what you have, that's your asset. As a buyer, you need to come in with some sort of skin in the game as well. So you need to have something that sort of makes it so that both of you have an asset involved in the transaction. And that is, for a buyer, called the earnest money deposit. So it's basically the deposit you put down in order to hold the house for you, to take it off the active market and have it sell so that they're not accepting offers from other people and they're not just going to ditch out and skip out on you. They can't, because you have a deposit held in escrow that applies towards your down payment. Typically, we like to see an earnest money deposit of 3%. It's not more than that, but 3% of the purchase price tells the seller that you're serious, that you really intend to buy the house, and that you have something to lose as well. The earnest money deposit is held in escrow until closing, and then it just takes off from what your down payment is. So let's just say, as a round number, a buyer is putting down $100,000 and their earnest money deposit, let's say, is $30,000. That $30,000 is held in escrow, and then when it comes time to close, they bring in the rest of the down payment. So it's not in addition to what you're paying as a down payment. It is just part of that, paid early, so that you're kind of putting the house on hold, so that you are the one with the interest in the purchase. You're the one who has an asset now that's holding that house for you, so that the seller can't just go turn around and sell it to somebody else out from under you. There is something in the contract called liquidated damages. That means, as a buyer, after you have released all of your contingencies, which we're going to get into in just a second, but once you've released all of your contingencies in your contract, then you are now considered as you're purchasing this house. There's not a way to get out of this at this point without risking your earnest money deposit. And so oftentimes, if a buyer does cancel escrow after having released contingencies, then the seller would be able to retain all or part of that earnest money deposit. So it is a risk. The seller's risk is that they've taken their house off of the active market, and your risk as a buyer is that you have now invested something in the process, so that both of you are in a position to want to make this work and to want to work it out. And truthfully, if a seller has their house off the active market, they're no longer accepting offers or having showings and that kind of stuff because they're in escrow with a buyer, and then that buyer cancels, the seller has now had expenses that are related to that time period where now they've got to go back on the market. They might not get as good of an offer because it's been on the market longer. People are sometimes wary of a house that has fallen out of escrow. So you have caused some damage to the seller at that point. And so the seller does have the right to request all or part of that deposit if you have already released your 3 contingencies, which we will get into next. Okay, on to point number 2. Second thing you really need to know about buying or selling a house in California and the purchase agreement, that is the contract that we're referring to. So the next part that's really important for everybody in the transaction to be aware of are the contingencies. There are 3 contingencies, main ones, that buyers have when purchasing a home. A contingency is a way for a buyer to get out of a contract if they learn information or something changes materially and they no longer wish to move forward with the purchase of the house. The first one is called the buyer's investigation. This one involves all of your inspections. You're able to do a full physical inspection with a professional licensed inspector. You're able to do, if you choose, a plumbing inspection, an electrical systems inspection, a mold inspection, a sewer line. You can also have a termite inspection or any other pests that could be of concern to a buyer. And you have a period of time to conduct all of those inspections. And at the end of that period of time, you are asked to release that inspection, which means you sign off on a paper that says you know what you need to know about the house. You have figured out what needs to be repaired, what needs to happen. You have negotiated with the seller to see if the seller is willing to help with any of those repairs, to do them him or herself, or to give you a credit towards having them done when you move into the home. And then once you feel comfortable that you've resolved any and all of those issues, then you sign off on that contingency. And now it's no longer something you can use to get out of the contract. This protects the seller as well as the buyer. The buyer is protected by gaining all the information they need to gain about the house. And the seller is protected by not having sort of an open-ended period with no end in sight for the buyer to back out. So once the buyer has conducted that investigation and has learned what they need to know about the property, then once they've signed off on the contingency release, now the buyer can no longer utilize the inspection or investigation contingency as a means of exiting the contract. The second contingency that is of great importance is the appraisal. A buyer will have an appraisal done on a home that will determine the value of the home based upon size, bedroom, bathroom count, condition, and also similar properties that have sold in the same area. And that appraisal for the bank should come in at least the amount the buyer is paying for the house. If the buyer, through the process of having that professional appraisal done, discovers that the house is not worth, according to the appraiser, what they've offered, now it's a time for negotiation with the seller. So the buyer can ask for the seller to reduce the price. The buyer can ask for a credit to cover the difference, or they can meet somewhere in the middle. And the seller always has the right to accept or deny any of these requests. So when you're a seller, you don't have to just blindly accept everything that the buyer is asking for. However, it is in all parties' interests to work together and compromise to make sure that a transaction closes and that everyone knows what they need to know. So if your goal is to sell your home and to sell it quickly, and your appraisal comes in underneath what the buyer is paying and the buyer requests some assistance with that, it is really in your interest as a seller to consider that and to make reasonable compromises in order to cooperate and get it done. And this protects both parties as well, just the same way as the investigation contingency does. So once the buyer's comfortable with the value of the house, then they can release that contingency. So you have to sign off a contingency release form that says that the house has appraised for the value that it should, or that you are comfortable with accepting the difference and you've reached an agreement with your seller about that. And then the third contingency is the loan contingency, which would only apply if you're not doing an all cash purchase. So the buyer can have up to 21 days to make sure that their loan will be able to close, that their loan is clear, it's good to go, nothing is going to change at the last minute. The lender's not going to come back and say, oh, just kidding, I can't get you this loan after all. So this is where you really get together with your lender and your realtor and talk about it and make sure, are we comfortable with releasing this contingency for the loan? Are we comfortable that this loan can close? And your lender should provide you with the assurance that you need. And your lender will also tell you, no, I cannot give you that assurance. And then that's when you come back to the seller and negotiate if you may need more time. All of these contingencies are, in the state of California, active removal, which means they don't just expire and, oh, well, it's already been the set number of days, so too bad for you. You have to actively remove them as a buyer. If you do not actively remove them, they are still in place and they are still there to protect you. A seller does, however, have some recourse just in case their buyer doesn't release their contingencies in a timely manner. And we'll get into that in a second. So, number 3 on the list of 5 things you need to know about the California Purchase Agreement. What happens when a buyer or a seller does not do what they're supposed to do by the timeline that they're supposed to do them by? So in the prior segment, we talked about contingencies. Per the contract, the standard amount of time for those is 17 days for the buyer's investigation, 17 days for the appraisal, and 21 days for the loan. What if the buyer isn't ready to release those contingencies and that deadline has passed? Well, the seller does have the right to deliver to the buyer what's called a notice to perform. Basically, it's like a little nudge, like a little friendly little poke that lets the buyer know, like, hey, you're supposed to release these, and it gives them 48 hours to do so. And then if the buyer does not release those contingencies or do whatever was requested and required by the contract, by the end of that 48-hour period, the seller does have the right to cancel the transaction. And the same is true for the buyer. If the seller has something that they are supposed to do by a specific deadline and the seller does not perform, the buyer is also able to issue a notice to perform and gives them the same 48-hour window to get done whatever they were supposed to get done. So again, this protects both buyer and seller. It gives the buyer a chance to get things done if they're not able to. And one thing that's really important to note is that when we're in the process of a transaction, everybody's goal is to move us to the finish line. Everybody's goal is to get it closed so that all parties get what they want out of this, okay? Sometimes a buyer may need more time for something. Maybe the inspection turned up a major issue that the buyer needs to have estimates done to see what is this going to cost to repair or replace once I move in. Maybe they need more time for that. There is a process involved there where the agents get together and discuss, and they request what's called an ETA, which is an extension of time addendum that gives the buyer that additional time. The seller doesn't have to agree to that, but the buyer can request it, and same in reverse. If the seller needs more time for something that they were supposed to do contractually, then they can request an ETA, and then once that is signed and in place, that provides a new deadline. And then at the end of that deadline is when you could issue a notice to perform in case that hadn't happened yet. So it keeps the process moving forward. And next, in the next section, we're going to talk about disclosures, which is really big for sellers and for buyers. Okay, next, number 4 out of 5 is disclosures. So when you are in the process of selling your home, it is vitally important as a seller, so important that you disclose anything and everything that you know about the home to your buyers. This protects you, but it also protects the buyers. It means everybody has all the information they need. This is the largest transaction that many people are ever going to conduct financially in their lives. So they deserve and legally are entitled to have any and all information that you have about your home as a seller. And as a buyer, you want to review these disclosures from your seller thoroughly. You want to read them all. It's a lot. There's a lot of pages. There's a lot of info. There's a lot of legal boilerplate language, and you can always consult with an attorney to have them interpret this for you and explain it to you. And you can also ask your agent questions as you are reviewing these disclosures. So disclosures themselves give us an idea of what do we need to know about the property. So I always tell a seller of a home, tell them everything, even if you think it's not important, because what I think isn't important is going to be different than what someone else thinks isn't as important. So make sure you reveal anything and everything that you know about the house. For example, we had a plumbing repair done 3 years ago in the sink in the master bathroom. Okay, it's important to disclose that. Anything you know about the house. The roof leaked 10 years ago and then we had it repaired. Or the seller of the home smoked in the primary bedroom and there may be tobacco residue on the walls. That is important information to disclose, okay? If there's anything that you know about the house, you must tell that to your buyers. And then as a buyer, you're gonna get this giant packet on email that's going to have all of these pages and pages of disclosures. You need to review them, specifically the seller's transfer statement, the transfer disclosure, and the seller's property questionnaire, because that's where the seller tells you everything you need to know about the house. They tell you what they know. Sometimes you won't have as much information because sometimes a seller is selling on behalf of a person who may have passed away and they may not really know. For example, if somebody inherits a property from, let's say, an aunt or an uncle, and they never actually lived in the property, but the aunt or uncle did, the seller may not know everything about the home that the aunt or uncle knew. So in that case, you will be made aware that the seller was not the person who lived in the home, so they may not have as much information. But when you are buying a home, please take your time and review those disclosures so well, because those are going to give you an idea of what you need to know. You know, what are the issues, the things that may have come across, the things that may have happened throughout the life of the home. You know, it's important to have that information so that you can be prepared for how you are going to care for this home when it belongs to you. And another disclosure that's really important that belongs to and falls on the shoulders of your real estate agent. Today, we are able to take a picture and Photoshop it. We can take out clutter. We can add in landscaping. We can use AI to modify it. And if you're a buyer and you see these photos and then you walk into the house and it looks totally different, you might feel a little cheated. And so we are required as real estate agents to disclose when we have modified a photo with Photoshop or AI or in any way. We have to disclose that on the listing and on the photo itself. We must have a comment that says something to the effect of, this photo has been modified. That protects the real estate agent, but also the seller of the home, because it makes sure that we're not misrepresenting the home and that we are letting the buyer know. Now, why would somebody want to modify a photo? Well, let's say there's a vacant house, right? And maybe there's a living room that has a little bit of a challenging layout, and the seller wants to show the buyers, hey, here's how you could set up this living room to take advantage of this layout. So maybe the realtor will put in some virtual staging into the photo, like a couch over here, a TV over there, and then they will disclose on the photo itself that this photo has been virtually staged. So that would be a case where then the buyer looks at the photo and goes, oh, okay, like that's how I could set that room up. I didn't even think about it that way. So there are advantages to doing it, but you must disclose. And that leads us to our very last of the 5 points, which is a really important one, and it's a new change. It's about finances. I'll give you a hint. All right, we made it to the end. Number 5, most important thing you need to know about the real estate purchase agreement in California. As of March 1st, 2026, the U.S. Treasury has changed some of the rules involving all cash transactions and transactions that take place with the buyer being a trust or a corporation or an LLC. And the reason they've done this is really to protect the real estate market so that we don't have these corporations or companies, shell companies, purchasing properties all over, and we don't know who's buying them. It's an anonymous buyer. We have no idea who it is. This keeps everybody honest. It makes sure that our real estate market stays healthy. What we truly want is for people to be able to buy and sell homes and live in them and enjoy the right of homeownership that we are afforded in our country. So doing this allows for less of that sort of manipulation of the market by these large corporations or entities purchasing properties all cash. Can you still purchase a property all cash? Absolutely. What you'll have to do is you'll have to submit information as to who are the beneficiaries of the trust or the corporation or the LLC. Who is it owned by? We need information on the owners. This is in place in order to protect our economy and our housing market. And it can cause some delays in a transaction if you're not prepared for it. So please make sure if you are entertaining offers as a seller from all cash buyers, make sure that the agents are aware of this added component that is put in place by the U.S. Treasury. And if you are a buyer using cash or your corporation or your LLC to purchase a property, make sure your agent is aware of the correct forms that have to be submitted in order that the transaction flows smoothly and we don't waste any time gathering information when we should have provided it to begin with. So that's it. Those are the 5 things that are really important to know about the contract. There's a whole lot more, but these are the ones that really tend to become issues the most frequently, or the people have the most questions about. So I hope this video helped answer those questions for you if you have those questions. And if you would like my free home buyer guide or my home seller guide, please comment below or send me a text message or call me at the number that's right up there at the top of my page. And I would love to send that over your way and just give you a guide for the whole process of buying and or selling a home, or the process of doing both at once, because that happens too. And that is a video I will get into at another time. But thank you all so much for sticking with me, and I hope you have a great day. Get out there and take a look at some real estate, and subscribe to my channel, please, so you don't miss any more of these videos. Bye-bye.